Hello guys, welcome to the fiction series. Today we are gonna see, what if Hitsugaya Toshiro remembered his life as Naruto? Part 4. If you want more awesome fan fiction like this, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, so without wasting any time, let's get into the video. I will never recover from this, Hitsugaya quietly despaired, wishing more than anything that any of these idiots had actually reminded him. At the time that Ichigo had pointed out that he was still in pajamas, there had been more pressing matters to attend to than focusing on changing clothes. He supposed, really, that he had brought this upon himself. So focused on the ideal way to explain everything that had occurred for the debriefing, he hadn't even realized his state of dress. He could almost feel Hashirama's amusement at his current predicament, and he was going to have words later. For now, he had to focus and deal with the repercussions. The teasing aside, good to see you well. Kairaku called, looking pleased. You've been missing for a spell, you know, it's put us all quite in a flurry here. Hitsugaya bowed his head lower. My apologies, Satachu. I had not intended to be gone for the duration of time that I've been gone. Explaining the circumstances will take a while, I'm afraid. Well, you can explain just fine, Shinji said, smiling thinly, it's not like we're going anywhere. Especially since you're in a world we ain't ever interacted with. Hitsugaya sighed. To begin this debriefing, he began, it is pertinent to explain that this world is where I had been born when I was alive. Oh? So truly, you weren't from the living world we govern, Hitsugaya Taichu? Mayuri asked, looking quite intrigued. With a twitch of the brow, Hitsugaya growled under his breath, clenching his fists. I will not tolerate any attempts to experiment on me, Kuritsuchi, he replied in a gruff tone. Oh, you say that as if the zombification incident didn't occur, Mayuri said. Hitsugaya clenched his fists tighter yet, lip twitching. Control. Control. This shouldn't be so hard. Just breathe. That is not the current topic of discussion, Hitsugaya snapped irritably. Something far too gleeful to be comforting crossed over Mayuri's expression. Hitsugaya wasn't sure what it was, but he managed to stamp down the agitation that had reared its ugly head. However, I had in fact regained memories of life and have had them since I recovered from the zombification incident. I believe it was one of your experiments that caused that. Oh, how interesting. Are you sure I can't persuade you to allow me to do a comprehensive checkup on you? Enough, Kuritsuchi Taichu, Sufing snapped. You're drawing this out. Considering how it's affecting him, there's a lot more to this story we aren't going to get if you don't zip it, Shinji said thinly. Hitsugaya cursed. Was that damned fox seeping through? He closed his eyes, taking a slow breath before opening his eyes again. In doing so, he saw that Sufing gave another look to Mayuri, eyes narrowed, before she turned back to Hitsugaya. Continue, Hitsugaya Taichu. Hitsugaya nodded. I did not have any intention to return, despite recovering the memories that by all rights and purposes should have been purified from me upon my death. Perhaps it was due to the nature of which I entered Soul Society that differs from the standard procedure, however that is conjecture. I have been informed that my being forcibly dragged back to this world was the work of a forbidden summoning technique, which confirmed my initial suspicions. It temporarily cut off my connection to Hashirama, but that has since been repaired. Chakra and Ryoku do not mix, and it was the source of this weakening. I had initially suspected that the summoning disrupted my ability to create a Senkamen, but it has come to my attention that the lack of connection between this world and Soul Society may be the reason I could not return of my own volition. The contemplative silence fell over the gathered Shinigami. A technique to summon the dead sounds troubling, Hitsugaya Taichu, Iba said, looking troubled as he turned his head down for a moment in contemplation. Why would they attempt to summon a captain? How is that even possible? Isane asked softly, her brows furrowed with worry. Hitsugaya let out a long sigh. By using the energy they have available to them and using parts of my corpse to anchor me to this plane. The reason for bringing me back lies in the fact that I am originally from this world. I am certain that I've been summoned back in an attempt to retrieve my tailed beast. In my world there is no concept of Soul Society. He could feel eyes on him and turned to see everyone looking at him, both on the feet and in person. Bewilderment and confusion. Unfortunate, but expected. Matsumoto in particular had a hand to her chest, brows pinched, something almost seeming to connect in her mind. He wasn't certain he wanted to know what connection she'd made. Tailed beast? Byakuya asked lowly, frowning in his direction. He turned back to focus on the meeting. This was the part he hadn't wanted to explain. He sighed and then reached to his shirt, pulling it up slightly. Focusing some of his newly regained chakra onto his hand, he placed it against his navel and, upon pulling it back, the seal was once again present. He didn't want to look at it. When I was born, I was utilized as a vessel for a beast of catastrophic power. This is the seal that binds us together. They call people like me Jinchuriki. He lowered his shirt, not liking the eyes that lingered. There is an organization that seeks to reclaim these beasts from their vessels. To what end, I never found out in my lifetime. My death was to the hands of the leader of this organization, as far as I'm aware. Whether anything else has been gained in regards to insight on their motivations during my absence from this plane of existence, I would not be able to say. The silence was deafening. Then a broad grin crossed Mayuri's face. So that's what it is. Urahara and I noticed that, but we lack the confirmation to know what exactly it was. How fascinating. Has it simply been dormant in a world whose composition differs so vastly from the one you are now in? Hitsugaya's brow twitched again. Yes, he said, reluctantly. The gleam in Kuretsuchi's eyes bode ill for the future, and Hitsugaya frankly wanted nothing to do with it. Sufing frowned as she looked over. If this beast, as you call it, is so much trouble. Hearing the implied question, Hitsugaya bristled. Still, he took a slow breath to keep himself calm. If the QB's words rang true, he needed to have control. It would not do him any good to let his emotions get the better of him. It was a benign enough question, coming from anyone but the 12th Division captain. I cannot be parted from the QB, he said simply. For what reason? Byakuya asked coolly. You have never needed to rely on its power before. It seems far more of a burden than it is worth. Urahara let out a long sigh as he stepped into view, snapping the fan over his face. Hitsugaya moved just enough to not be crowded. Simply from feeling it in close quarters, he began, it falls in line perfectly with mine and Kuretsuchi's hypotheses. Their energy is so intertwined at odds or not that if they were to be separated, Hitsugaya would not survive. Just to hear the ugly truth was enough to sink something that burned in Hitsugaya's chest and in his veins. Ignoring the stares, Hitsugaya kept looking forward, meeting Kairaku's widened eye. Yes. He closed his eyes, then. There were only 9 of us at a time. I knew another like me. He died from the extraction. I would not be able to speak of the fate of others like us. Lisa, Rose, Shinji and Kensei all looked to each other, a silent conversation passing between them. Zaraki, in the meanwhile, growled. Their point to all this noise. He said. Hitsugaya's eyes narrowed. Perhaps if you paid attention, he replied sharply. They now no need to get so tense, Shinji interrupted, though his eyes were focused sharper on Hitsugaya than he would have liked. So 9 of you, yeah. And they want yours enough to drag you out of an afterlife. Yes. It is likely that either all the others are dead and I am the last, or they incorrectly assumed that this ritual would ensure an easy retrieval. His eyes narrowed. But based on the knowledge I had prior to my death, the one who was responsible for my summoning should not have been in a position to summon me. Nor should he have been allied with a group that seeks my capture. He let out a sigh. There still appears to be much that I'm missing in regards to information. But it appears that you know enough to say that a simple return to Soul Society would be unwise, Lisa said finally, pushing up her glasses. With a single nod, Hitsugaya lowered his head. That is correct. Well. Leave the relay active until you can return. Report back regularly and make your final decisions on the forces you need to ensure this gets cleaned up. Kairaku sighed. What a mess. Take care of yourself, Hitsugaya Taichu. Yes sir. Once the line closed and all Hitsugaya could see was his own reflection, he closed his eyes. Hisagi. Kira. Madaram. Asagawa. Return to Soul Society. Be at the ready to return should reinforcements be necessary, though I can't foresee that being necessary now that I've recovered to an optimal state. The 4 offered a bow. Rukia moved a hand to her chin with a frown. Are you certain, Hitsugaya Taichu? Hitsugaya rubbed at his temples. Yes. I am certain. This situation must be navigated carefully, and so to prevent any unwanted side effects to this world, we must minimize the amount of interference we have. He looked into the blank screen again. I have already had too much of an effect. I do not want to keep pressing against fractured glass. That couldn't be helped, Urahara said, snapping the fan shut. Would you like to do the honors of opening the Sinkamen, Hitsugaya Taichu? It may put your mind at ease to see that you can, now. Hitsugaya wouldn't admit that Urahara was right when he managed it. With a brief farewell from the eccentric former captain, he and the other 4 returned, leaving the remainder of the Shinigami in that room. Matsumoto let a moment of silence pass before putting her hands together. Suo, can we take a look around the place, Taichu? Get an understanding of the lay of the land. The captain turned to Matsumoto with a flat stare. If you cause an altercation, I'm sending you back to Soul Society with the express order of completing all the paperwork until I return. Ichuu, how could you do this to me? She pouted. Despite the twitch to his brow, Hitsugaya felt eased. He recognized what Matsumoto was doing. The familiarity was welcome. Garama sneered, glaring out through the cage. This had gone on for far too long. Trapped so long, nothing short of dormant in this spiritual vessel, he had been smothered by this Ryoryoku. He had lacked the means of worming his way out. He had lacked the ability to do anything. Still, they had noticed him. He's dead who had never even heard of him. These dead who had no memories of such an existence as his. They could still feel him, lurking within Hitsugaya. They still feared him, still feared his Jinchuriki, even if they had no frame of reference, even if they had no idea of what crawled under their skin. Yes, of course Hyorimaru's power was intimidating. Yes, of course Hitsugaya's frigid nature in death could put out even the most formidable person. But in the end, he knew far too well what it truly came down to. It was always the monster. Always the beast. Always the nature of a Jinchuriki to be feared. To be loathed. To be alone. So to come back now after so many unsuccessful opportunities to finally be free of this pest, to have the very fundamentals of his Jinchurikis being twisted by the hooks of the Ito Tensei that gripped into his Ryoryoku, rooting chakra into that which no longer possessed it, creating the spiral by which he could start feeding his power out again. Bringing them back to a world where he had strength again. Well, it was the opportunity he'd been waiting for. But a being as old as he had patience enough to see this through. He would find a way to be free again. It was only a matter of patience. And then he would make every last human pay. This feels a bit like overkill. Hitsugaya's brow twitched. Yeah, because I'm still here. Twitch. We all know that's bullshit, Renji. Twitch. Ah. You wanna fucking go, Ichigo. Twitch. Oh, would you both stop it, Rukia snapped, her brow twitching as she adjusted the extra cots they'd requisitioned from the Serite for the nth time, looking rather annoyed at this dance being played out again. Her annoyance shone clear, leaving him as thankfully not the only annoyed one. Momo stepped out of the bedroom, having finally changed her own clothes as the rest of them had. The outfits were rather plain, as Hitsugaya had counseled them not to stand out too much. Hitsugaya, who sat at the kitchen table that was now pushed out of the way to make room for said cots, laid down his brush wisely before his agitation led to him snapping it. This was his favorite brush, after all Kichiki has the right of it. I understand that you question the choice I've made in term of reinforcements, but I would err on the side of caution. Throwing away lives of my subordinates is not a preferable outcome, and you are more than capable of handling yourselves in a fight. There ain't anything happening, Hitsugaya Taichu, Renji grumbled. Then I suggest, the captain said slowly, eye twitching more, you either follow Matsumoto's lead and take to finding something to occupy yourself with, or you go and get your reports from the Serite and get some work done. The pair cast glances to each other. They then glanced back to Hitsugaya. Hinamori and Rukia followed their gazes. After a few moments of silently bickering with Renji about who would ask, Ichigo let out a disgruntled sigh as he decided fuck this and ceased beating around the bush. Come to think of it, Toshiro. Hitsugaya. You haven't left this apartment all day. Hitsugaya let out an annoyed sigh through his teeth. He clenched his fists as he schooled his displeasure. I was not inclined to reveal the identity I had in life to this place. Unfortunately, necessity dictated I cast aside my personal reservations for the sake of the many. Well, you don't look like that kid in the photo, Renji said, trailing off. In this world, some people possess an amount of chakra, living energy. Different from humans who can manipulate Ryatsu in the living world we are used to. It may be the way the living world and soul society are connected that affects that. He shook his head, derailing that theory. In any case. Varying techniques were developed by utilizing these techniques, allowing for a wide variety of combat and stealth-oriented skills. This has something to do with those clones, right? Renji, Rukia and Hinamori all looked over to Ichigo with varying levels of confusion. Clones? Hinamori asked. Yes, Hitsugaya said. It is a technique called the Shadow Clone Jutsu. It is a forbidden. The Shadow Clone Jutsu in particular was made forbidden due to the ease of a user's death, were they ill-equipped to handle it. Hitsugaya-kun. Don't tell me that. Hitsugaya let out a sigh. Hinamori. It was my signature jutsu in life. The Shadow Clone Jutsu will split the user's power evenly between the clones and the original. The reason for its lethal nature is that many shinobi simply do not have the reserves. But it was in my nature as a Jinchuriki to have just that. So by using that technique, Rukia began slowly, eyes widening in realization, you revealed yourself. To the correct conclusion, Hitsugaya gave a stern nod. Ichigo's brow furrowed. Right. Well. I think I'll go take a look around. See just how much is different here compared to home. Hitsugaya gave a curt nod. Don't cause trouble. Dismissed. Boy. The substitute Shinigami snapped as Hitsugaya scooped up the last of the paperwork he'd completed. That wasn't an invitation to dismiss me, I'm not even your subordinate. Toshiro. Hitsugaya simply ignored him as he closed the door to the bedroom behind him. Man, what a pain, Renji complained. Ichigo shot a glare over to Renji. I should have stayed behind, Rukia immediately lamented. Hinamori let out a soft sigh. You would have left me alone with them, then, Kichiki-san, she said softly. Really, though, she was concerned about Hitsugaya. Though he'd seemed to be relieved when a limiter was finally able to be put on and a Gigai acquired following the return of part of their reinforcements, there was still something that was troubling him. However, he'd gone back to being closed off again, and she was certainly having an issue of trying to understand what was wrong. Renji's stomach proceeded to growl. He let out a groan of dismay. Man, I hope the food here's the same. Place looks a bit like the Soul Society in a way. Hitsugaya cooked normal food, Renji, Rukia reminded him harshly, noting the glances they'd gotten from some wayward villagers. Hinamori frowned, hearing people starting to whisper. She picked up hints of a name. Naruto, the name she recalled those other humans calling Hitsugaya. She wondered what Naruto was like, how much of that person lingered in her childhood friend. But that's because he's Hitsugaya. He's from here, he'd know how to use the stuff they have here to make things we know. Doesn't mean they prepare it the same. More looks. Rukia was lamenting Renji's severe lack of tact. Ichigo glanced around, catching glances from the civilians that were now paying a bit more attention to them. He elbowed Renji roughly, causing the other man to squawk indignantly. What was that for? He hissed. Rukia gave him another elbow and a sharp glance before giving a look around to the civilians. Whatever. Let's find some food. Oh. There you are. The four looked in the direction of the call and caught sight of none other than Matsumoto. She was waving, a smile on her face. And? Rukia frowned. Hinamori also frowned as she gave a single side eye to Rukia before looking back to Matsumoto. Where did you get the money for all that? Matsumoto blinked at Hinamori's question, looking to the bags hanging off her arms before smiling brightly. Oh, I asked Taichu about it before I left. Rukia didn't look convinced. I swear I did. She folded her arms. Hinamori also mirrored this gesture. Okay, fine. I wrote a note and I borrowed some of the currency he had on hand. But I didn't spend it all, and I was going to go grab you two to go shopping for some new stuff for you as well. The fashion here is so fun, they really love fishnets here. She pouted. I still wonder where some of these people get those quaint little bands with the plates on them. I think it'd make a cute little necktie, though I wonder if you can get them with different symbols, but no one sells them. That was definitely garnering some looks. Hinamori looked around more insistently and blinked as she saw what appeared to be a raiment store. Food. She immediately called out, hurriedly grabbing Rukia's wrist and tugging her along, grabbing on Matsumoto's arm as well. Abarai-kun was hungry, so we should get some food. It looks like a ramen shop, so move it. Finally, they were away from prying eyes. Welcome to Ramen Ichiraku. A young woman said, smiling towards them. An older man was busy manning the cooking stations as she spoke. What can we get for you all? Hinamori took a seat. We're new around here, so we might need a second. Thank you. Ah. Pleased to have you, then. The name's Tucci. This is my daughter, Am. Hold on, Ichigo said slowly as he glanced to the wall. What's the Uzumaki Naruto special? Who's that? The name caught the attentions of the other Shinigami as they glanced over. They too recalled the name that the humans had called Hitsugaya. Ah, you really must be new, the man, Tucci, said. He looked older yet at the question, despondent as his shoulders slumped. The woman, Am, frowned. Naruto was so very important to us. My father and I knew him since he was a little kid. You were a kid yourself, Am, not much older than him, Tucci chastised softly. He looked at the group and smiled tiredly. Naruto was a good kid. Pretty lonely kid. You know about the attack. The empty glances given in return had Tucci sighing. Foreigners, I take it, though rather strange that you didn't hear about it, even then the village was attacked 20 years ago, by the QB. The nine-tailed fox. It was a horrible night. So many lost their lives. The fourth Hokage, our leader at the time, sacrificed himself to seal the beast into a baby. That baby was Naruto. He was an orphan that was always treated despicably. The kid wasn't the beast, but people didn't seem to realize that. This seemed like something that Hitsugaya would not want them to know. But Tucci was earnest in his retelling, and at this point all of them were hooked on the story. Am looked to her father, who rubbed at his eyes. I'd seen Naruto properly for the first time when he was glancing into my shop. Kid spent most of his early years running around the village and causing mischief. He couldn't have been older than 5 or 6 at this point, it's a bit hard to remember his age at the time, he was always here, but he was this small, scrawny thing. It was a downpour that day, he was soaked. I tried to wave him in, but he started running at least until he realized I wasn't trying to shoo him off or chase after him. That was honestly the worst part to me, you know. He was just a kid. But he had no family. No friends. And everyone was against him. So I gave him a bowl of ramen, free of charge, and let him dry off. After that he was our best customer. I was so fond of him. To lose him. Tucci took a moment to breathe, hand over his eyes as he turned away. Seeing this and seeing the clear lack of understanding of what had happened on the faces of the Shinigami, decided to finish the reminiscing. He gave his life to save this village. And he took the QB with him when he left. We wish we could do more, but all we can really do is immortalize what he loved in our shop. It isn't enough, but it's all we can do. So that's the Uzumaki Naruto special. His favorite order. A large miso ramen with extra chashu. Ichigo's hands shook as he glared at the table. He clearly wanted to say something, but grit his teeth and looked away. Hinamori looked devastated. We'll take the Uzumaki Naruto special, then, Matsumoto said firmly, smiling. Yet despite everything, she ached from the story as well. He must have been a really special kid. He was, Tucci said fondly. He was a mischievous kid, bit of an attention seeker at times, but he had this way about him, you hear it a lot around here. His greatest strength was always his empathy. Because despite suffering the worst of it, he cared. He cared so much. The will of fire burned strongly in him. AM smiled softly as she brought 5 large bowls to Tucci, who started plating out the fixings. She helped with the preparation, of course, and one by one, the large bowls were placed in front of each of them. Thank you for the food. And with that, they dug in. Renji's delighted relief, the food was the same as food to be found in the human world, not to mention the ramen was delicious. He and Ichigo both chowed down in earnest, while the ladies ate a bit more reserved. Matsumoto was lost in though, her expression withdrawn as she slowly ate her bowl. If this Naruto and Hitsugaya were indeed the same person, it painted a poor picture of how people tended to approach him. She remembered the shopkeeper and how cold he'd been towards Hitsugaya and Junranin. She hadn't even realized that it could have been a long-standing attitude that Hitsugaya always had to deal with. Though clearly, it wasn't a one-off from the look Hinamori had on her face. She wondered if that had been the feeling she'd gotten off him that day. Not necessarily the spiritual pressure he gave off, though that was part of it, but the beast. Hinamori, likewise, was withdrawn as she ate her own ramen. Not to say it was bad, quite the opposite. It was delicious, and she could easily understand why Hitsugaya might have liked it in life. As an orphan who had nothing and no one in his corner, a hearty bowl like this would have been a godsend. She thought of Shiro-chan, young and grumpy and mischievous in his own way, pelting every passerby with watermelon seeds. She wondered if he'd had just a bit more time, if she hadn't gone to the academy so soon, if she had been a little more in his corner, would he have been more like the person they spoke of? Boy, Tucci-san. The man in question looked up, expression softening as a familiar figure to him stepped in. The group of 5 looked over, seeing a spiky brown-haired teenager with one of those headbands Matsumoto had mentioned wanting on his forehead. Konohamaru. I was surprised to see that you weren't in yesterday. You usually come in after the memorial. I was trying to figure out what Naruto's old team was doing, they all went missing, and so did the Kazekage, too. AM looked over. How do you know this? Oh, I just heard people talking about it, Konohamaru said. Lady Tsunade was trying to keep the Kazekage's entourage from staking a search for him. Shizune was also trying to find Sakura and Ino, too. He looked over. Who are they? Foreigners, they said, Tucci said. I'm humbled to have their patronage, so try not to bother them too much. Okay, yeah, anyways, did you see earlier today? Naruto was here. He was protecting us. Ichigo choked on his ramen. As Rukia gave him a whack on the back, AM's expression grew stormy. That's not funny, she said sternly. Don't joke about that. I'm serious. It's all everyone's talking about. When the evacuation notice was sent because of that attack, I was trying to help out and then I saw a bunch of shadow clones of the same guy. The one who was killing those weird monsters. It was Naruto. We went to the cellar for that, Tucci said with a frown, but that sounds too good to be true. They're just rumors, Konohamaru, AM said, frustration on her face. He died. Yes. He did. Hitsugaya kept movement restricted to the rooftops. He'd stepped out of his gigai to facilitate his current endeavor, leaving the mod soul to clean the apartment while he was gone. He was frustrated and annoyed, but kept himself focused on the task at hand to distract from it. It'd only give QB more leverage. That couldn't be afforded now that he had a limiter on, so he needed better emotional control. Even still. He arrived at the administrative building where the Hokage's office was located and let out a low sigh. He entered the building. This was an action he decided he regretted, as immediately the casual ambience fell to a dead silence. Here, one jounin began. Hitsugaya's brow twitched. I seek an audience with Lady Hokage, he said sternly, keeping his shoulders squared up and back straight. Posture and power was important to convey his station, as his Haori didn't hold any significance to the present parties. The incident this morning needs to be discussed. Another jounin paused, and a frown grew on her face. He tensed as he watched a woman's posture shift, as though she'd discarded what rumors she'd heard and what she'd seen, and instead perceived him as an impostor of sorts. Currently she's. Ah. Hitsugaya's eyes shot sharply to the new voice that interrupted. Shizune. The woman jumped. Lady Tsunade has been expecting you. I'll see you right to her. Hitsugaya offered a bow of his head as he instead followed her. He ignored the looks and the whispers, ignored the glances to Hyorimaro on his back. He ignored everything except the path forward. Shizune stayed silent as she held Taunton firmly to her chest. He did not seek to fill in the silence. Enter. Shizune opened the door. He's arrived, Lady Tsunade. And with that, she stepped aside, allowing Hitsugaya to enter in and close the door behind him. Lady Tsunade, Hitsugaya said, offering a curt bow. The woman stood at the desk, Kakashi to the side of the desk, and Yamato to the other. Hitsugaya, good to see you well. Hitsugaya's surprise only seeped through with a subtle widening of his eyes. Kakashi kept me informed. I see. I believe you are to thank for my initial stabilization upon my arrival back in this world. And Sakura, Tsunade cut in. But that is not relevant to the subject at hand. I believe that is about this morning. Hitsugaya nodded curtly. An incident that is directly a consequence of my being stranded in this world. A more detailed explanation, if you have it now, would be appreciated, Kakashi cut in. Hitsugaya sighed. The Shinigami of this world sent me to a different afterlife. There was an alteration of temporal relativity between our worlds, which following a debriefing from the scientific division was discovered to be the fault of my removal of the QB from this world. So time here has moved much slower than it has for me. In that world my chakra was converted to Riryoku. The change from life to death. But that change went my memories, until recently. I see, Tsunade said, hands folded before her mouth, expression stern. Due to the nature that I was summoned this Edo Tensei, as the technique is called, I was pulled to this world without a limiter. The technique disrupted my energy, reducing my power drastically, and it even started changing its nature. But as time moved on and I recovered, my power was left unchecked. The attack this morning, as such, was a direct consequence of my presence. Those creatures, hollow they are called, they cannot be harmed in any meaningful way by the living. Purifying them and sending them to the cycle is part of my organization's duty. They are attracted to Riryoku, and I possess a large quantity of it as a high-ranking official. I apologize for putting the village in danger. He took a knee as he bowed this time. Rise. Hitsugaya did so. Tsunade looked him over and sighed. So, how do you propose we deal with this? Both the side effect of your presence drawing these hollow here and the Edo Tensei incident. I have since made contact with my organization and I have sufficient reinforcements to deal with any repeat incidents. We will stay a time to monitor the situation, evaluate the level of damage done by my presence, and if deemed minimal, we will return to the Soul Society without any further interference. It is not our place to get involved in the affairs of the living. He noticed the crease in her brow grow. As for the Edo Tensei incident, he let out a sigh. That, unfortunately, must be nipped in the bud before it can be repeated. Hyorimaro interrupted the attempt to bind me the first time it happened, but it still left me out of sorts. I do not wish for it to occur again, as it will only continue to detrimentally affect both your world and mine. Both Kakashi and Yamato had excellent poker faces. But so did he. I and my forces will further remain until users of this technique are eliminated. Any insight you can provide into the matter will be greatly appreciated. I will furthermore be seeking to destroy any further traces of my original vessel that could be used to make this technique even viable. His eyes narrowed. So what did you do with my body? He died. Yes. He did. The new voice cut in and immediately caught the attention of the Shinigami. Taichu? Matsumoto called, raising her hand. Come on, have some ramen. Hitsugaya's eyes narrowed. I'd much rather discuss why you took my money with a thank you note and then bought clothes with it. That's the note you left him, Renji hollered in alarm. Ah, Taichu, come on. You wouldn't want us to starve and not fit in, would you? Hitsugaya opened his mouth to argue but was interrupted as Konohamaru stepped in front of him. If he was slightly annoyed at the fact that Konohamaru was now slightly taller than him, he didn't show it. Konohamaru, meanwhile, stared at him. Your face. Hitsugaya let out a frustrated sigh. I suppose it can't be helped. I left my apartment on business matters, but I know it's impossible to escape the recognition in this situation. Hello Konohamaru. It's been a long time. Konohamaru choked, confusion and pain and relief all together. Naruto. I was, once, Hitsugaya replied simply. His eyes dragged over to Tucci and Am, gaze softening. Large miso ramen, extra chashu. I'll take 3. It's been a while, Tucci-san, Am-san. Tucci's expression shattered into anguish and joy. Naruto. Being hugged was not something that Hitsugaya had ever grown to appreciate. This had not changed even after his memories had returned. But it felt different when it came to Konohamaru. He let him, quiet as he stared over Konohamaru's shoulder at Tucci and Am, and heard only Konohamaru's sobs. You were dead. I don't understand, AM said softly. Hitsugaya sighed. What a situation. I am dead. There is no way to come back from death, and I did not. That you can see me right now is due to the density of ambient energy here. But I imagine, to you too, Tucci-san, AM-san, I do not look normal. The two looked him over and then slowly nodded. You're translucent, Tucci verbalized. Hitsugaya nodded. Because I am dead. The two looked to each other as Konohamaru's hands tightened on his haori. You didn't deserve to die, Konohamaru lamented. You didn't deserve it. You weren't supposed to leave. The sighing was just going to keep happening now, wasn't it? But they were living. They were human. He just had to have patience. I did not have a choice. But I've come to terms with my afterlife. Do not cry for that which is done. He slowly pulled himself away from Konohamaru to see the 3 bowls set on the counter. I imagine you would like to get some food as well. Konohamaru looked to him, rubbing at his eyes. With you, Naruto. The sighing did not seem it would stop anytime soon, and he felt tired. He gave a stern look over to the looks he was getting from the present Shinigami. He pointed directly at them. Not a word. At the questioning glance from the 3 living humans, he reluctantly decided to oblige them. They're my subordinates. I lost my memories. The name I use now is Hitsugaya Toshiro. I'm not your subordinate, Ichigo said as he pointed his chopsticks at Hitsugaya. I'm just helping, Toshiro. That's Hitsugaya Taichu to you. Yet despite everything, despite even the strange way the others kept looking at him, sitting back at Ramen Ichiraku and eating 3 hearty bowls, while Konohamaru talked to him about his progress on his Rasengan training. It was strangely nice. With bowl number 3 polished off, Hitsugaya let out a satisfied sigh as he set it down on the counter. Nothing compares. How did you do that? Ichigo was the first to ask, mystified. Hitsugaya looked over to Ichigo, raising his eyebrow, expression flat. I used my mouth, he replied. Ichigo looked at him and then at the others. Hinamori shrugged. He was able to do that with watermelon all the time in Junranen, she said simply. He'd spit the watermelon seeds at people. Because they annoyed me, he replied firmly. But, I don't see why it's so impressive. The speed. Especially cause you're so small. Hitsugaya's eyes twitched. I am average. A small part of him was glad to have the limiter, so he didn't have to micromanage his Ryatsu. Still, it felt like the air was a bit colder around him as he glared at Ichigo, daring the man to say anything. Ichigo, clearly, was ignorant to the looming danger. Average for A. Rukia grabbed Ichigo's ear and yanked it forcefully. Don't you have any tact? As Ichigo worked to wrench the iron grip off his ear while yelling incoherently, Hitsugaya took the time to reach for the wallet he'd stashed away, counting out the amount to pay for their meals. At least someone valued their lives. And yet. You don't need to pay, Tucci said immediately, holding his hand out to keep Hitsugaya from handing the money over. He looked up, brow furrowing. But. You have done so much for this village that having you here is payment enough, Tucci insisted firmly. A soft smile graced his face. You've been dearly missed. Hitsugaya's frown grew. I understand, Tucci-san, that you wish to give this meal free. I do appreciate it. But you had done enough for me in life that I can't simply accept that. We decided it. It's on the house. AM insisted. Determined not to give on that, Hitsugaya still left some money on the counter, looking AM dead in the eye as he did so. Then I'm leaving a tip. He glanced down the table towards Renji, Ichigo, Rukia, Hinamori and Matsumoto, who were still at varying stages of finishing their ramen. When you're all done with your leisure time, I will be back at the apartment. I've had enough social interaction for the day, and there's much to get done and evaluate in the coming days. He'd rather nap than deal with any of this any longer. He got up to leave, only to pause as his sleeve was tugged. He looked over to Konohamaru, who had largely lapsed into silence when he was done. The teen looked to him. Are you going already, big bro? Big bro? Hitsugaya shot a firm look back towards Renji, eye twitching once before turning back to Konohamaru. Yes. I have work to do. And do not spread word that I am back. My being here is temporary. But everyone knows. Frustrating. Hitsugaya pursed his lips as he turned his head away. I am aware I cannot pretend away my presence. The situation called for me being highly visible, much to my chagrin. That does not mean I am back. The dead do not have a place among the living. Konohamaru grew frustrated at this. But there's so much I still want to do with you. I still want to learn more from you. Hitsugaya turned away. I do not have the ability to teach you any longer. You are living. I am dead. We are now fundamentally different. He stepped out towards the entrance to leave, intent on getting out of the situation before it could get any more uncomfortable. Thank you, once again, for the meal. Goodbye. Oriak no jutsu. Oh. Oh no. Oh hell no. The sound of Renji and Ichigo spluttering was all Hitsugaya had to hear, followed by varying levels of appalled shock from Hinamori and Rukia. He closed his eyes, absolutely mortified. He refused to turn around. Not today. Absolutely not. His past actions were coming back to haunt him. This would ruin him. His hard work, his reputation, in shambles. Konohamaru. Dispelled at this instant. Not in our restaurant. Am shouted. And Konohamaru, in his hinged feminine voice, said, well that got you to stop leaving, huh? Still recognize your own work I see, big bro Naruto. Hitsugaya placed his face in his hands. He was done for. But really, Taichu, I never knew this side to you. I feel so enlightened. He was in hell. This had been going on ever since they'd left. Constant rousing, jabbing, and japery. It was infuriating. His station now meant nothing in the face of his childish attention-seeking gambits in life. Matsumoto. For the last time. I was 13, a living human child, and it was for pranking adults. I will never use it again. Matsumoto gave him a shake as she pouted. Ah, come on, surely you can do more with it. Maybe a bunch of hot men. Like a reverse harem. No. I never expected that out of you, that's for sure, Renji muttered, rubbing the Rukia-sized hand-shaped mark on his face. Ichigo rubbed his own face, which sported a mirrored hand mark. Seriously? Completely out of left field. He already said it was an invention in life, and he is a different person now, Rukia said heatedly. It seemed like she was the only one who was willing to not acknowledge this revelation more than was necessary. Certainly a more mature person than he once was. Ichigo grumbled, or maybe he's just better at hiding it, it's a thing for kids his age to be. Hitsugaya whirled around on his heel, at the end of his rope. I am not a kid. I am Hitsugaya Toshiro, captain of the 10th Division. I haven't had my living memories in over 100 years, and anything I did in life is not pertinent to the person I am now. You will do well to remember that. Hinamori pat Hitsugaya's shoulder gently. He thought maybe, Hinamori would see some sense, but then. It's okay to be embarrassed about it, Shiro-chan. It's Hitsugaya, he hissed, feeling humiliated, and this was over 100 years ago. He looked to Rukia, who blinked rapidly as he pointed at her. Kichiki. You're the only person I am not livid at right now. You're in charge until I go back to the apartment. I'm not putting up with this anymore. Taichu? Matsumoto cried in dismay. Hitsugaya shot her a glare. Absolutely not. I will not hear what you have to say. Dismissed. He escaped with a swift shunpo before anyone else could say anything further. Hang on, is he okay? Rukia gave Renji a whack over the head, sparing his face another lingering mark. It was a genuine question. Hinamori fretted, now. He's really worked up about this, I was trying to console him, but I think he took it the wrong way. Staring after the path that Hitsugaya had taken to remove himself from the situation, Matsumoto frowned. Something like this wouldn't normally get Hitsugaya this bent out of shape. Something felt wrong. Certainly, he'd yell, he'd display indignation, but he'd looked off as he left. It was something that happened in life, it was something that didn't really matter anymore now to him, so why take it so personally? She froze in her steps. The group carried on forward for a bit before Ichigo blinked and turned on his heel. Banjiku? He asked, curious. Something up? Oh, she said softly. Oh no. I think I know what's wrong. At this, they turned to face her properly. Hinamori turned on her heel to look at her, eyes widening. I've been trying to figure it out, it's like he's taking it like a personal attack. I think he sees us poking fun at this new piece of information as is not seeing him, but the person everyone here keeps trying to make him be. As Hinamori's expression twisted to distress and Rukia shot a sharp look to both Renji and Ichigo, Matsumoto turned, reaching out her senses to feel out Hitsugaya's location. You guys go on ahead, I'll go find him, okay? She didn't give them another chance before she shunpoed away. Hinamori watched after her, frozen in place and wishing so desperately to go and comfort her friend as well. But as he'd taken her intentions poorly. Well, it was probably for the best that Matsumoto was the one to talk to him right now. Frustrating. Hitsugaya swung high Orochimaru at the training dummy, the blade scoring into it cleanly. Frustrating. He changed his stance before striking again. Keep restrained. Keep calm. Keep level. Breathe. Regulate. Strike. Frustrating. An uppercut followed by a quick swipe down. Slower than he would have liked, but clean. Not a score out of place. Restrained. Practiced. Efficient. This was all so fucking frustrating. The dummy cracked down the middle as it was enveloped in a sharp spire of ice. He bared his teeth, gripping the hilt tighter. Damn it all. 5 dummies through and this is where he loses himself. Pathetic. He didn't want to be here. It was too hot. There was so much unfinished business. Excessive amounts of unnecessary emotional baggage. Memories he'd rather not have tampering with the afterlife he had now. He wasn't supposed to be here. It was supposed to be over. He was never supposed to remember. He was never supposed to know anything about this. He wasn't supposed to do anything but live the rest of his afterlife and then pass on to whatever came after without any more major disturbances like the unrelenting hell they'd all been through ever since Aizen came into the picture. Nothing was ever so simple, however. He let out a slow breath and then snarled as he struck the ice, splitting it in half and truly rendering the dummy a lost cause. Hopefully no one actually needed that intact. Penny for your thoughts, Taichu. Hitsugaya let out a growl. He was still frustrated with her insistence of holding the incident over his head. No. Matsumoto sauntered forward, frowning as she propped her hand on her hip. I can tell something's wrong, you know. You're more uptight than usual. You haven't been this out of sorts since Hinamori-chan was out of commission. Hitsugaya, in his frustration, lashed the sword through the ice again, cutting another chunk down. I didn't realize just how upset you'd be about the teasing, she said after that, her voice a bit more worried. I didn't mean to upset you this much. Another strike sliced carved into the ice, cutting the dummy's head in two uneven pieces. It's not just that, he finally admitted reluctantly. Or, rather, it's part of the problem as a whole. Where everyone looks at you and they see a person you aren't anymore. She knew him too well, sometimes. Yes. I am not the person they knew. I do not want to give up everything I've achieved just to be the person they want me to be. That person is gone and dead. He glared at the ice block that trickled down slow melting water. That person, Uzumaki Naruto, he's been dead and gone for over 100 years. I am so far removed from that person, even if the memories haunt me. Matsumoto pursed her lips. Taichu. They have grieved me. They have mourned me. I understand it's difficult for them, but I'm not. He let another frustrated growl out as he sheathed Hyorinmaru. The poor dummy would no longer tolerate any further abuse. It's not fair. None of this is fair. It's as if they want to taunt me with the life I lost by putting me in that box, tying these achievements and these deeds to me until I have to go for good. She reached out, placing a hand firmly on his shoulder. Taichu. He looked to her, gritting his teeth. What? The beat of silence followed and Matsumoto offered him a soft smile. Let's go get some ice cream or another cold treat they have around here, okay? It's pretty hot out, it'd really hit the spot. And we can bring some back for everyone else. And then we figure out where we go from there. He saw it for what it was. A distraction. Still. Fine. I suppose someone has to ensure you don't get into trouble. He wasn't going to admit that the distraction was welcome. So this part ends here. Alright, that's it for today's video guys. Let me know in the comments section how was the story and also don't forget to like, share and subscribe. I will meet you in another video. Bye bye.